So next up is a special guest, a good friend of mine, a Latina candidate, one of the most special ladies in Rhode Island, period, is our Lieutenant Governor, Sabina, Mrs. Matos. Nice to introduce yourself.
Thank you. So it's truly a pleasure for me to be here with all of you. I'm Sabina Matos. I was appointed Lieutenant Governor of the state of Rhode Island last year. It has been the honor of my lifetime. Before that, I was in the Providence City Council. I was a councilperson for over 10 years, and I had different roles in the City Council, and the most recent one was being president of the Providence City Council. We were able to move several agendas while I was in the Providence City Council that I was very concerned with. One of the reasons I used to represent Ward 15, which is Olneyville, Silver Lake, and Valley, and initially the West End also. And one of the challenges that I noticed and that I was frustrated about is that Olneyville was not getting the attention that the neighborhood needed. There was not enough resources going into the Olneyville neighborhood, and that's an area in which I concentrated a lot. And another of the reasons why I ran for office is because it seems like every time someone was going to make, and even the news, when they were going to make a negative reference, they used to use Olneyville as the reference for negative things happening in the city of Providence. And I wanted to change that. And if you see my post early on, you can find the hashtag that says Olneyville, Silver Lake, Ward 15. I was trying to make sure to bring attention to the positive things that were happening in the community, because nobody was talking about the good things happening in the community.
Right. And how do you see yourself if you were the next governor of Rhode Island? Like, what would you do to change the infrastructure of Black and brown people, right?
So I'm going to be running for re-election for the position of Lieutenant Governor. I'm going to ask the voters to give me the opportunity to represent them for 4 years. It's going to be a challenge for me running statewide. It will be the first time that I'm running statewide. But what I'm hoping that I can bring is the experience that I gained working in the community and the opportunity to show that representation matters. Mm-hmm. Because when I was able to represent my community, I was able to speak in the city council about topics, issues that no one was talking about. Right. I was able to bring attention to the issues that no one else was talking about. And I'm asking for the state of Rhode Island to give me that opportunity also to represent the state of Rhode Island, and also to bring representation and talk about things that probably they have not been talking about, I can tell you. One of the things that is priority for me, because I have experienced this as a local elected official, is housing and how it's affecting our community. Right. Right now, we cannot afford to live in our community. One of the biggest challenge that I had when I ran for office at the beginning, I said Olneyville was seen as this negative place, everything negative. Through a lot of work, with a lot of partners in a lot of community organizations and the work that we did, Olneyville right now is a place that people want to go to. But the biggest challenge that we have is to make sure that those individuals that were there before are not being displaced. That the people that were there when no one else wanted to be there are not pushed out of their communities right now because they cannot afford to live there. That's the biggest challenge that we have right now, to make sure that it's affordable housing that for those individuals that have been there all along, and for our own community to live there. Right. One of the, I remember that when the Preservation Society did their annual meeting in Olneyville, they invited Majora Carter from New York. And she said something during her presentation. If you haven't seen Majora Carter speak, you should look it up on there. She has a YouTube. She's just amazing. And something that she said right there in Olneyville at the King's Cathedral Church, she said that we have to change our mentality about how we think about our neighborhood. We don't see the value in our neighborhood. And for most of us, we think about being successful is that our kids are gonna do better than us and they're gonna move out of the neighborhood. But why can we improve the neighborhood for us? Why can we, and the phrase that she used was self-gentrification. Why can we not be self-gentrifying our neighborhood?
Right.
We can add a new coffee shop, and it can be one of us that is the owner of that coffee shop.
Right.
New businesses are coming, and it should be one of us that own those businesses. It shouldn't be always people from the outside coming and opening new shop and new businesses.
Right.
And again, I'm a big supporter of welcoming new people as long as we're not displacing the ones that we have been here.
Right. Thank you, Governor. Lieutenant Governor, we appreciate that. And what can you say about like the large mass incarceration rate in Rhode Island for African Americans? Never mind Latinos, but African Americans. The history of mass incarceration in Rhode Island. Like, how do you feel about that? What can change about that, from the General Assembly part of that?
Yeah.
That's controlled by mostly European, our white brothers and sisters. Like,
I think, again, it goes back to representation. When you look at the number of elected officials that represent our community, finally we're gaining some numbers and we're getting to a point in which we have elected officials that represent the community, but there's still this work to do because those elected officials are going to be working in legislation that are going to be affecting our community. One of the biggest challenges for communities like the one that I have represented for so long, and the zip code 02909, is that most of the reentry population go back to that zip code.
Right.
But we don't have resources to help those individuals that come back into the community so they can reintegrate into society. And again, it goes back to housing.
Right.
In many cases, because when someone comes out of the prison system and goes back into the community, and they're not able to stay with their families and maybe live in an affordable housing unit because they're not allowed to, and they not able to find a job that they can be able to provide for their family, that just create this cycle that they keep going back into the prison system. Back into the community with no resources. So we have to make sure that we have resources available to help people transition out of that cycle.
And the last one.
Yes.
How come there's not a lot of African Americans and Black and brown people like in trades and constructions that really align themselves in Rhode Island as a competitor, right? Mm-hmm. Because you have, for the past history, you have all white construction owners and instructors. That really blows my mind in the state that no one's talking about, that they have these individual contractors that are Black, but they're not getting the big jobs. Like, they're not bidding like the Italians, the big boys are holding those contracts. How come nothing's not being done about that?
I think there's different levels to that issue. And one is something that is happening right now is that the individuals that traditionally were into the trades type of work, it used to be a tradition that their family members used to go into the trade, and it became a family business, and it used to be passed down from generation to generation. Something that has been happening is that in many cases, the children of those individuals that have been part of the trade, they don't want to go into the trade. And they have found themselves in a challenged position right now in which there is a lack of workers to going into the trades. So I think this is a time for us to make sure that we continue to bring job trainings opportunities to our community, because those are jobs that they're gonna have a career, and it's not gonna have, and they're not gonna be with a lot of student loans that they will have to pay back. So we have to take this opportunity right now to make sure that we bring as many job trainings as possible to our community, to plug in our young people
Right.
into the job trainings that are available. And I don't want to forget this, because this is so key and we need to be paying attention to it. And it's that the blue and green economy, those are the jobs that are coming now, the jobs of the future. And if our community doesn't get trained and not participate on this, we're gonna be left out again.
Right.
Someone paint the perfect picture for me about what is happening with this green and blue economy, and also with the broadband, which is a lot of federal funding that is coming in broadband. And someone gave me this analogy that if you think about it, about when the cable industry expanded, actually the minority community didn't take part of that boom and didn't build wealth at that time, right? So the minority community now is when we have been getting into, and you see contractors installing cable, when the industry is not as hot and it's not creating as much wealth as before. So we need to be at the forefront right now in the broadband and the green and blue economy.
Right. So quickly, so only because that we've been dealing with a huge state of emergency as far as like education, and the biggest one is homelessness, right? What have you guys done about homelessness? Because we need to talk about that.
Yeah.
It's so important that in the littlest state in the union that you have a high rate of homeless people. Like we need to talk about that, and what can we do to make change about that?
Yes. So as I mentioned, housing is big for me. It's my number one topic, my number one issue that I'm working on. But since I was appointed lieutenant governor, I have been working with Governor McKee, and Pastor Chris also has been part of these conversations early on. It has been many, many months having meetings with the different stakeholders that have been working for years on addressing the homelessness challenges that we have in the state of Rhode Island. This is not something that just happened at the end of the year. There has been many planning sessions that have been planned, working towards what's going to happen what happens every year, because this is not only this year. Every year in the winter season, we're faced with the same challenges. And Governor McKee put together a team that has been working on making sure that we address this problem for the long term. That we're not back at the same place every winter, trying to figure out where we're gonna house the individuals that are homeless in our community. So this is work this has been happening already for many months. This is not something new, and this has been a priority because our goal is to solve the problem for the future, to make sure we're not going to be faced with the same challenge every year. So this is very key to us. Another thing that I wanted to mention that we do a lot is we deal with the problem of homelessness after the fact, but we're not doing enough to prevent homelessness. If we were able to put more resources into the prevention of homelessness, things would be much different right now. Since I became lieutenant governor, I've been having these lunch and learns conversations around housing, and they're available online if you want to go and watch them. And we have learned a lot about the challenges that we have when we're trying to use the resources allocated for assisting individuals that are homeless. In one of the things that we have learned is that at the federal level, there are about 8 different definitions of homelessness. It depends on which agency. Right. The HUD definition of homelessness basically doesn't allow for resources to go to the preventions. So if my house burned, right, and I don't have a place to go, and let's say some of my friends put funding together and pay for a hotel room for me to stay, based on the definition that HUD has, I'm not homeless. If my sister allows me to stay in her house, I'm not considered to be homeless.
Right.
So I faced this very close to me, close to my heart, with someone in my community that was displaced actually because the city of Providence condemned the property, right? The city of Providence condemned the property. All we did was gave her funding for, and it was a grandmother with two granddaughters. The city was gonna pay for 1 week of the hotel. Through working the city council, we were able to extend that. She was staying in the hotel for about 3 or 4 weeks. After that, this grandmother had to pay herself to stay in the hotel. Every door that we were knocking, my office was working and calling all of the organizations that are working to assist homelessness. I was faced with the same challenge. Is she in the shelter or she's living on the street? Because that was the only way how they could provide resources for them. So what does that, like that grandmother, she had the custody of her granddaughters. She didn't want to go into a shelter with them because that could open other doors of problems for her with DCYF and other challenges, right? And she was doing everything she could not to end up on the street, sleeping on the street with her granddaughters. So that tells you about the magnitude of the problem and what we have to do to change policy, not just only at the state level, but also at the federal level.
Right.
We have to put more resources to prevention. Right. We have to prevent homelessness, right. Because if we don't do it, we're going to continue to spend all of our money that we could be using for education for something else, right, to address the homeless problems instead of preventing, and it's going to cost us less money.
Right.